In a small two-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Columbus, Ohio, Laura had lived for years. It was a modest space, inherited from her parents, with creaky floors and walls adorned with faded wallpaper that echoed the 80s. Despite its quirks, it was her sanctuary. The bathroom, a cramped space where the toilet and shower shared the same room, had a door with a lock that had been broken for so long that she couldn't recall the last time it had worked. Perhaps it was back when she danced under the August sun at local fairs. Living alone, she had never found this little inconvenience burdensome. Guests were rare, and when they did come over, it was usually for her famous pumpkin ravioli, not to inspect the state of her locks. Her cat, Lily, was perfectly content, often sprawled out on the mat in front of the tub, soaking up the warmth. But life has a way of shaking things up when you least expect it. A year ago, her daughter, Clara, and her husband, Eric, called with news that they needed to leave their downtown apartment for a while. Their building was about to undergo extensive renovations, cracked walls, peeling ceilings, and the smell of fresh paint everywhere. "Mom, can we stay with you for a couple of months?" Clara asked, her voice so sweet that Laura couldn't bear to say no. After all, she was her daughter. Eric had always seemed like a kind, polite guy, always ready to lend a hand. He was never overly expressive, but he wasn't intrusive either. So, they arrived with their suitcases, a toolbox, a toaster, and even their iron. Laura thought it would be a temporary arrangement, a brief inconvenience. Little did she know how complicated things would become. All three of them worked. Laura was an administrative assistant at a small private clinic, Clara was a sales associate at a cosmetics store, and Eric was a technician at an industrial automation company. They all left early in the morning and returned late in the afternoon, and that's when the real battle began. The battle for the bathroom? Yes, that tiny room with slightly chipped tiles and a foggy mirror. Mornings felt like a bustling train terminal. The first one to arrive got the best chance to prepare for the day. Evenings were the same story. Everyone wanted to wash away the fatigue, the heat, and the sweat of the day. Laura was used to living alone, turning on the light and leaving it on if she knew she'd be back in the bathroom within the hour. She had never closed the door, why would she? Lily would slip under it and curl up on the mat. But with Clara and Eric, things changed. Initially, they tried to adapt. Eric spoke little, but occasionally made comments. "Laura, maybe it's better to turn off the bathroom light when you leave. We're not at the Grand Hotel," he would say with a smile, though his tone was more serious than joking. Laura would respond lightly, joking back, "It's my contribution to sustainability. A light bulb adds a bit of warmth to the home." But inside, she began to sense that something was off, that the walls of her sanctuary were starting to close in. And the lock? Well, no one bothered to fix it. Once, she even asked Eric, "You're so handy, could you take a look at it?" He shook his head, "Not really my area. I work with electrical panels, not doors." He suggested a plumber's number, but honestly, she didn't want to spend money on something she had lived with for years. What was the big deal? So, every time one of them entered the bathroom, they had to become secret agents. Knock, listen, speak softly. "Is anyone in there?" It felt like a scene from a comedy. Yet, it became routine. To make matters worse, the shower faucet dripped even when it was turned off, and in the sweltering summer heat of Ohio, they found themselves showering frequently. Eric would come home from work as if he had spent the day inside an engine, often showering twice a day. Laura tried not to disturb them, but the discomfort began to settle in. It wasn't just the shared spaces, it was that she started feeling like a guest in her own home. Clara and Eric would sometimes enter the bathroom together, Clara brushing her teeth while Eric shaved, laughing and helping each other like a well-matched couple. And there she was, waiting outside, feeling like a schoolgirl in line, waiting for her turn. Laura had been searching for solutions to the ongoing bathroom dilemma. Clara suggested they wake up half an hour earlier so Laura could have the bathroom to herself before heading to work. For a while it worked, but then came that day. She returned home from the clinic with a terrible stomachache, having trudged painfully from the bus stop. All she could think was, please let the bathroom be free. Fumbling with her keys, she kicked off her shoes and dashed toward the door, only to hear the sound of running water. Shower in progress. Eric, it's urgent, she knocked, her voice strained. There was no response, just the sound of water and a cheerful tune being hummed, likely driven by necessity. Slowly, she opened the door. The shower curtain wasn't fully closed, and there he was, Eric, suds on his shoulders, sun-kissed skin, strong arms. Her gaze instinctively dropped lower, but she quickly averted her eyes, feeling embarrassed. Sorry, I just need a minute, she stammered. He jumped, nearly tripping over the bottle of shampoo. Oh, pardon me, Miss Laura. She quickly ducked behind the curtain, did what she needed to do, and slipped away, her cheeks flushed. Surely, he would fix that lock now. But the next day, the same scene played out. Tired of waiting, she knocked softly, silence met her, and when she opened the door, there was Eric in the shower again. This time, he was washing his hair and humming an old folk song. The curtain remained partially open. He caught her eye, and they both blushed. I'm really sorry again, he said, his voice laced with genuine embarrassment. Instead of getting angry, she replied, Eric, if you just fixed the lock, we could avoid these little dramas. Inside, she felt a spark she hadn't experienced in a long time. After that encounter with Eric in the shower, she thought things would change. Surely, he would rush to fix the lock or at least avoid repeating the awkwardness. But nothing changed. No one openly discussed what had happened, yet the air felt different. An imperceptible tension lingered, not unpleasant, but rather tantalizing. Every gesture seemed charged with a subtext that hadn't been there before, a smile lingering a moment longer, a gaze that held just a beat too long, a silence that spoke volumes. Laura continued to play the role of the calm and orderly housemate, but inside, something was awakening, something she had tucked away with old clothes she no longer wore. She didn't confide in anyone, not even Lily, her cat, who sometimes watched her with a judging look. Yet, she began to take more care of herself. When she went to the bathroom, she would fix her hair, apply a hint of perfume, and though no one knew it, she did it with the hope that maybe today, Eric would walk in while she was there and tell her once again how good she looked. One sweltering summer evening, she returned home later than usual. She had to stay at the clinic to sort out some paperwork, and when she walked in, she found Clara already in their room, tired, with a book in hand. Eric was in the kitchen, washing the dishes. She greeted him with a distracted smile and headed to the bathroom, craving a long, relaxing shower. The water was warm, enveloping, almost therapeutic. She closed her eyes, letting the steam wash away the day's tensions, but just a few minutes in, there was a light knock. Miss Laura, I'm sorry, but it's urgent. Before she could respond, Eric entered with a respectful stride. Fortunately, she was behind the curtain. He quickly used the sink, all in a matter of seconds, and was about to leave when he turned slightly and said, I'm sorry again. Does your bathroom always smell this good? She didn't reply, but a shiver ran down her spine, a sensation that was neither cold nor fear. In the following days, strange coincidences began to occur, too precise to be mere chance. Every time Clara had an afternoon shift, Eric found a way to come home early. Whenever Laura took a shower, it felt as if the door had become transparent. Not in a literal sense, of course, but the atmosphere thickened, becoming more intimate, filled with unspoken words. One evening, as she was stepping out of the bathroom, still wrapped in a towel around her hair, she found him standing there in the hallway. The hallway was quiet, the air thick with anticipation. Laura stood there, her heart racing as Eric looked her in the eye, a half-smile playing on his lips. "Have you ever thought about changing your shower curtain?" he asked, his tone light yet meaningful. She laughed softly, knowing he was right, the curtain didn't conceal much. A part of her was pleased he had noticed. Weeks passed, and life continued its monotonous rhythm: work, home, dinner, news on TV. Yet, internally, everything had shifted. Each day felt like a waiting game. Every sound behind the bathroom door sent a jolt through her. Every moment alone with Eric became a delicate dance. He never crossed boundaries, but he edged closer, inch by inch. And she, for her part, did nothing to push him away. In fact, she welcomed it. Then came that Friday afternoon. The heat was oppressive, the air thick like syrup. Clara had mentioned she would be late, the store was closing at 9 for a promotion. Eric had come home just before her, claiming he wasn't feeling well and had asked to leave early. He didn't look sick, he looked expectant. Laura changed quickly and headed to the bathroom, her mind clear of any unusual thoughts, at least, that's what she believed. She left the door slightly ajar, the steam from the shower curling around her like a warm embrace. Lily, their cat, was curled up on the rug, blissfully unaware. The water flowed, and the steam rose, creating a cocoon of warmth. Suddenly, the door creaked open. "Excuse me, Laura, I just need to grab my razor." "I always forget it," Eric said, his voice low and respectful. But it wasn't just that. There was a moment of silence, the kind that felt heavy with unspoken words. She turned her back to the curtain, pausing mid-motion. The sound of the water was the only thing filling the room. "Can I stay for a moment?" "I don't want to disturb you," he asked softly. She didn't respond, but she didn't send him away either. He sat on the edge of the tub, the air thick with tension as she finished rinsing off. When she stepped out, wrapped in a towel, they found themselves face to face. Their eyes locked, and for a heartbeat, the world outside faded away. Then, as if nothing had happened, he left. Laura stood there, her heart pounding like a drum. From that day on, it felt as if they had created a secret code between them, an understanding woven through small gestures. Eric volunteered to wash the dishes. She pretended to forget her towel in the living room. He mentioned a problem with the sink and went to check it out. Clara was immersed in her work shifts, home renovation plans, and phone calls with the architect. She suspected nothing, which brought Laura a mix of relief and guilt. After years of silence and routine, someone made her feel desired, not as a mother, but as a woman. One evening, Clara announced she would be going out with a colleague after work. Laura and Eric shared a simple dinner: salad, bread, cheese. They chatted about mundane things, but when Laura stood to clear the table, Eric took her hand. "You know, Laura, sometimes I think life brings us encounters that surprise us, and we don't always know how to handle them." His words pierced through her, a blend of ice and warmth. She didn't respond, the lump in her throat choking her voice. It became harder to distinguish what was right from what simply made her feel alive. Each day felt like a fragile balance between who she was supposed to be and who she wanted to become. And in the middle of it all was Eric, with his quiet gestures and a gaze that seemed to reach just a little further each day. That Saturday afternoon, Clara went to visit a friend in a nearby town, promising to return later that evening. Eric stayed home, claiming he had a headache. Laura seized the opportunity to bake a cake, a simple ricotta and lemon treat they both enjoyed. the kitchen filled with a delicious aroma. Lily dozed on the chair by the window, and for a moment, everything felt perfectly normal. Then Eric walked in, freshly awakened from a nap. His hair was tousled, a wrinkled t-shirt clung to him, and his eyes still held the remnants of sleep. He sat at the table, took a slice of cake, and said, "You have a way of making even an ordinary Saturday feel special." She smiled, looking away, but inside, her heart fluttered. The afternoon unfolded in a tranquil yet peculiar manner. Laura was busy washing the dishes while Eric organized the bookshelves in the living room, making excuses to linger nearby. They exchanged playful banter and shared laughter, but beneath it all, there was an unspoken anticipation hanging in the air, a sense that something was about to shift. As the time for a shower approached, the sky outside darkened ominously, signaling an impending storm. The atmosphere felt heavy, charged with the weight of unspoken words. Laura took her time, undressing slowly before stepping into the warm embrace of the bath. She closed the curtain, hoping for a moment of solitude, but just a few minutes in, there was a soft knock on the door. A gentle tap. Silence. Then came Eric's voice, low and almost apologetic. "Laura, I'm sorry to bother you, but I forgot the shirt I need to iron. It's on the coat rack. Can I grab it?" She didn't respond, frozen in place, but the door creaked open anyway. There were no abrupt movements, no invasion of her privacy, just the sound of light footsteps. He was near, arranging something on the dresser, yet he didn't leave. "It's strange," he said, his voice thoughtful, "how significant a glance or a presence can become." In that small room, her heart raced so loudly she feared he might hear it. Words eluded her, she lacked the strength to speak. And then it happened. Not a grand gesture, just a simple statement. But it was enough. "You know," Eric continued, "sometimes I feel like when Clara isn't around, this house has a different rhythm, and I feel different too." He turned, opened the door, and stepped out, leaving behind a silence thick with unexpressed feelings. That evening, Clara returned in high spirits, sharing stories about a new project at work, a colleague who had gotten engaged, and the possibility of a promotion. Laura pretended to listen, nodding and smiling, but inside, she was still in that steamy room, caught in the pause before a life-altering sentence, in that moment when everything could have changed. In the days that followed, Laura avoided being alone with Eric. She concocted excuses, ventured out for groceries even when she didn't need anything, and locked herself in her room with a book. He seemed to notice her retreat but said nothing. One evening, however, as she was hanging laundry on the balcony, he approached her. "Are you afraid of me?" he asked, his tone serious, different from his usual lightheartedness. "No," she replied, avoiding his gaze. "I'm afraid of myself." He nodded silently, then said, "Clara and I are looking for a new place. Our apartment is almost finished. We might be moving in a month." Those words hit her like a cold wind. She should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt an emptiness, a sense of something ending before it had truly begun. The weeks flew by. The bathroom lock was finally fixed. Eric took care of it one afternoon while Clara was out. Laura only realized the change when she tried to open the door and found it locked from the inside. She stood in the hallway, a strange sense of loss washing over her, as if that small repair had closed a chapter she wasn't ready to end. That evening, Eric spoke to her while they were alone in the kitchen. "I just wanted you to feel safe, to know that I wouldn't intrude on your space anymore." He paused, and Laura wished she could tell him that her space was no longer just hers, that he inhabited it silently in her thoughts and actions. But she remained silent. Lily, from her corner, watched them as if she understood everything. When moving day arrived, Laura helped Clara fold sheets, pack dishes, and put away the pictures she had temporarily hung. Eric loaded boxes into the car. The house suddenly felt enormous and empty. Before leaving, he pulled Laura aside in the hallway. "Thank you for everything, for your hospitality and much more," he said, his voice sincere. "Of course," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. He looked at her for a long moment, silent, then smiled and stepped out. Laura sank onto the couch as the sound of the keys turning in the lock echoed behind her. Lily jumped onto her lap and curled up. She stroked the cat gently, trying not to think of anything. Or at least she tried, but deep inside, she knew it wasn't over. Not yet. Days passed, quiet and orderly, almost too much so. The house had regained its usual calm, which she once found comforting, but now it felt only empty. Mornings returned to their slow pace, devoid of footsteps in the hallway, without voices echoing through the rooms. Laura adjusted to the quiet rhythm of her home once again. The faint sounds of the kitchen and bathroom blended together, creating a backdrop that felt both familiar and unsettling. Even Lily, her loyal cat, seemed disoriented, often pausing at the living room door as if expecting someone to walk in at any moment. She sipped her coffee slowly, the radio playing softly in the background, filling the silence that had settled over the house. Evenings were spent reading, with no one to comment on the news or interrupt her thoughts. Yet, beneath this calm, a subtle restlessness stirred within her, a light unease that lingered just out of reach. Sometimes, while showering, she caught herself smiling unexpectedly, recalling moments and casual phrases that had left a mark. She thought of Eric, not as her daughter's husband, but as that kind, quiet man who had made her feel something she believed was lost forever. One afternoon, the phone rang, breaking her reverie. It was Clara. "Mom, we're almost done unpacking. We're having a housewarming dinner on Sunday. You'll come, right?" Laura hesitated for a moment before responding, "Of course, how could I miss it?" When Sunday arrived, she brought a homemade cake and a small vase of flowers. Clara's new home was bright and modern, filled with light furniture and airy curtains. Clara beamed with excitement, while Eric greeted her with a warm, lingering hug that only Laura seemed to notice. He smiled at her, a look that seemed to say, "Everything is okay." During dinner, Eric spoke little. Clara animatedly shared stories about their new neighbors, the plants on their balcony, and a yoga class she wanted to start. Laura listened and smiled, but a sense of suspension hung in the air, making it hard for her to fully engage. As the evening drew to a close, Clara stood to walk her to the door, but Eric offered, "Wait, love, I'll walk Mom to her car. Let me grab my jacket." They descended the stairs together in silence. Outside, a gentle breeze stirred the evening air, warm but not hot. When they reached her car, Eric paused and looked her in the eye. There was no hesitation or excitement in his gaze, only calm. "How are you?" he asked. "Fine, more or less," she replied with a faint smile. He nodded, then added, "I often think about that time, about everything we didn't say." Laura lowered her gaze, unsure how to respond. He continued, his voice steady. "It wasn't fair to you or Clara, but it happened, and I won't forget it." She bit her lip, feeling the weight of his words. Lily awaited her at home, the house empty, the radio still playing, everything as it had been. "I won't forget either," she whispered softly. A heavy silence settled between them, one that felt deep and full. Then, with a respectful step back, Eric said, "Good night, Mrs. Laura." "Good night, Eric," she replied, watching him ascend the stairs without looking back. Once inside her car, she didn't start the engine right away. She sat there, hands on the steering wheel, staring at the windshield. The porch lights reflected dimly on the glass. The following days passed without any significant events. Their interactions remained cordial, maintaining the roles of mother and son-in-law without any hints or allusions to the past. Time gradually draped everything in a veil of normalcy. A month later, Clara invited her to spend a weekend at the lake. Laura declined with some excuse, feeling unprepared. She sensed it was time to let go, not of Eric, but of that part of herself that had clung to the unexpected, the spark, the illusion that something could truly change. The following weeks were dedicated to herself. She resumed walking in the parks, writing in her journal, and sorting through old photographs. She even unearthed a summer dress she hadn't worn in years. One Saturday, she wore it just to stay at home, feeling not young, but truly alive. Some time later, she received a postcard from Clara and Eric, featuring a snowy landscape and a brief note, "A big hug from us, with love." She placed the postcard on the fridge next to her grocery list and headed towards the bathroom. The light had been left on, and she turned it off with a smile. Lily followed her, tail high, and Laura spoke to her as if she could understand. "Yes, I know." Life continued to move forward, and in that moment, Laura realized she no longer needed to keep that door open. Not out of fear or hope, but because she had truly found herself again. Subscribe to the channel,